Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike, and today I'm here with attorney Zack Hendon with the Hendon Law Firm, and we're going to go over understanding workman's compensation. But before we begin, we have to give a disclaimer. This is for informational purposes only. Zack is an attorney with over 30 years experience, and he's providing this information to help you, but it cannot be considered legal advice. If you need legal advice, you'll need to set up a meeting or a consultation with an attorney near you. If you're in the metro Atlanta area, please give the Hendon Law Firm a call and go sit down and meet with Zack. Zack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Mike.
Great. Well, hey, let's jump right into this because we're talking about workman's compensation. Can you just kind of give us an overview? What is workman's compensation?
Well, workman's compensation or workers' compensation was what they call a grand bargain that was reached about 100 years ago with most states. There's individual state laws. Georgia has its own workers' compensation law. And as you might recall, toward the turn of the century, there was a lot of manufacturing going on, and a lot of employers were getting sued because people were getting injured within their workplace, and the workers were bringing lawsuits. The employers didn't like that because the employers were having to fend off these lawsuits. The workers didn't like it because they were subject to common law defenses such as contributory negligence, which could bar them from recovery. So the individual states, about the same time, they developed what's known as a system of workers' compensation. It's compensation without regard to fault. So even if the injured employee may have been doing something negligent on his own, it's not going to bar him from recovery. And on the other side of that bargain is that the injured employee, in order to get these workers' compensation benefits, has given up his or her right to sue their employer or their co-employees for injuries that they may have sustained in the workplace.
So this is really designed to protect the worker and the company.
Yes, it provides benefits for both. Originally, it's of course, its main emphasis is protecting the worker, but certainly the employer gets benefits out of it as well. And they have number one, they have a covered workforce that so their workers don't have to worry if they do get hurt about feeding their families. And number two, it provides them with what they call the exclusive remedy doctrine. In other words, the worker's exclusive remedy in case of an injury is workers' comp. It is not to sue the employer for things like pain and suffering and permanent injuries.
Great. Well, and that leads us right into it. What are workers' compensation benefits? What do they get?
The injured worker is entitled to 3 benefits under workers' comp, and only 3 benefits. Those 3 benefits are medical treatment without any deductible, indemnity benefits, which is kind of considered your lost time benefit. Okay, if you're losing time from work because of an injury, that's your weekly salary that's getting paid back to you. And the third benefit is the PPD rating, or the permanent partial disability rating, which is paid at the very end of the case when all the indemnity benefits have already been paid out.
Okay, great. So in going in that mindset, what types of injuries, what injuries are covered by workman's compensation, and what injuries are not covered under this?
Okay. Well, most injuries that you can think of, most physical injuries would be covered. There are some defenses where the employer could say the injury might be idiopathic. Okay, the meaning of idiopathic is it has come from an unknown cause. Typical types of idiopathic injuries can occur if a person, let's say a person faints at work. If the worker would look to point out specific things, and I've had cases like this where the worker points out specific things that shows why he fainted, and the reason he fainted is due to some factor that has taken place at work. The employer in those situations will say, well, no, this is just something that happens to people sometimes. Sometimes people faint, and we just don't know the reason for that. So idiopathic injuries are not covered. And there are other types of injuries like purely psychological injuries. Those are not covered. So now if you have a physical injury that is tied to a psychological injury, like quite often we'll have physical injuries. If someone gets their leg cut off, they're going to have severe depression, and that's a psychological injury, and you can have be disabled from a psychological injury. But if it's purely psychological, that injury wouldn't be covered by workers' comp.
Okay.
And I can give you an example of that. There was a case, it was probably 15, 20 years ago. There were massive floods down in Albany, Georgia. And there was a guy whose job it was to go around the city and clean up the city. Well, when these floods happened in Albany, and I think he worked for the Parks Service down there or the sanitation service for the city. But when the floods came on, what it caused to happen were all these coffins and bodies started rising to the surface in Albany, and the person, this worker, while he had no physical injury, he went around gathering up coffins and some of these corpses that were floating out in the river. And even though he had no physical injury, about 3 days after he spent time doing that, he developed severe depression and severe psychological injuries. There's been a move in Georgia to correct that, because it's not a, when someone sees something like that has happened, it's clear that that is something that's work-related, but the way the law is currently written, a purely psychological injury is not covered.
Okay. So that could change in the future, but as of now, that's not covered.
That's correct. As of now, purely psychological injuries are not covered.
Okay, great. Well, how about this? Can an employee sue their employer for a work-related injury under workman's compensation? Or would it have to be a different set of circumstances?
Well, and the term, I guess the question that I would have was the term sue. A lot of people think of a jury trial when you use the term sue, like you would if you sue someone in a car wreck case. You go to a jury and you have that type of lawsuit. Workers' compensation is an administrative process, which is, you file a request for hearing and the case is heard before an administrative law judge, and it is not what you typically think of as a lawsuit. You can file the workers' comp case against your employer, but as I was saying before, your exclusive remedy is that workers' comp case. You cannot file a separate lawsuit against the employer for your physical injuries. Now, you can sue your employer for things like for violations of things like federal law, such as discrimination, or and that can be racial or age discrimination, or different acts like the Americans with Disability Act. those can be lawsuits. But in terms of your physical injury for a work injury, your exclusive remedy is the workers' comp administrative remedy.
Great. Well, Zack, I just want to thank you for your time and for helping all of us understand workman's compensation and workman's compensation law a little better, and so that we kind of know what we're looking for and when we need to talk to you about it. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Zack Hendon is an attorney with 30 years experience. And if you're in the metro Atlanta area and you think you have need of a workman's compensation attorney, be sure to give him a call at 770-284-3737.